I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about how much watching dailies actually adds to their day. Like if you're doing a 14-hour day on set, are you spending like another 4 hours watching
Well,
everything like
yeah,
every
with
day?
film, with digital, I don't because you see it live and assuming it was recorded, everything is fine. I would, a current show, I get dailies. We get dailies and we get stills from the dailies. So I find that more useful. I get the stills from every setup from the dailies colorist, from our masters, and then I put them into a file folder on my phone so I can quickly pull up a frame from every setup. That's the actual original. And the DIT also still keeps frames too, but I have it from dailies. But with film dailies, you have to look at it because that's the original. And if it's something screwed up, you have to know if it has to be reshot. Now, often you get a negative report, from the lab saying this is scratched or this was out of focus or things like that. Whoever's doing dailies will make notes and send the notes back to you. And then you look at dailies and check for everything. So yeah, there's a lot of time spent watching dailies. Although my first 3 features were before, right in the early days of the Avid. And so I think my first 2 films were cut on film with work print. And I found that really useful to actually print everything every day and go to the lab and project it because I would see everything on a big screen. And I learned exposure and everything very meticulous because I'd see everything filtering, but that was in the early days of the Avid in the 90s. Then dailies would be VHS and then went from VHS to DVD. So NTSC video, and they weren't very sharp. So, after my first 2 films, everything went to VHS dailies, which looked terrible. And I had no idea if I was shooting was actually exactly that or not. And I had to just go by experience. The experience I got from my first 2 films, printing everything, I could then apply for the next decade looking at bad video dailies.
Wow.
The trick on indie films was to print things now and then. You'd print the first day's dailies and project it and look at it. And then every, in 2 weeks, you might print a shot here and there you're not sure about, or you tell the producer, look, I really want to print this camera roll and double check things again. That was your only, until you got to the final edit and the master and the answer printing, you often didn't know exactly how the negative looked.
So there's just days where you're going blind, like.
Well, you see video dailies. It's just they would be fuzzy and often flatly transferred. Colorists generally had a rule with video dailies, which was no whites above 90 and no blacks below 10 IRE. So everything would be kind of flattened down a little bit, no matter how many notes you sent them. Again, when I started out doing these straight-to-video thrillers, B-movie stuff, they were all films that were finished and basically answer printed, and then we'd make a color-corrected IP and then transfer that to video for home video mastering. And they were generally sold to European television. And they had very strict standards in Germany, for example, about nothing clipped and nothing could look clipped. Like they didn't want to see any detail lost in highlights and stuff like that. So it was very conservative in terms of lighting. I was not allowed to have lens flares in the shot, things like that. Nothing could be too hot or too dark. So that tends to be a little bit boring in terms of the cinematography. Although it did force me to learn to be very technically, again, precise because I knew I'd get rejected by German television if I had this or that. But one of the things I started learning was this was, again, a problem with doing low-budget films is that the telecines of the time, some of them had an auto knee function. So essentially you could roll off highlights. So if you had a bright fluorescent tube in the shot, it would do a knee compression on that thing. So to keep it from clipping or up to the clip points, only the white part of the tube would be clipped. If you didn't have knee compression setting in the telecine and in the color corrector, you could only set the overall level of the image, right? So if I had a bright fluorescent in the shot, I'd have to set the transfer level for that fluorescent because I'd have to set, that fluorescent at 100 ARE, and everything below that would be whatever fell at that level. So I was like, well, the whole shot looks dark because I can't, if I had
it's like auto exposing for the brightest point.
If I, with knee compression, I could take the last 10 IRE and flatten the curve like a log curve effect, and so I could color correct everything below it a certain way, and then just compress the knee down to where I could keep it legal. So I started having trouble in telecine suites with scenes, and I finally said, "What's going on with?" And it goes, "Well, this telecine doesn't have knee compression," and so then I'd have to go to the producer and say, "No, you got to book these telecine rooms based on what they offer." But a lot of the post houses back then weren't very clear about that. We have 6 telecines here. You're now at telecine 4, and you'd find out telecine 4 didn't have the same features as telecine 6 or something like that. So you have to start memorizing the features in every room and tell you got to book it in telecine suite 6 because they have this feature. And it was those were tough times, basically.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier now.
Part of like the meticulousness that you had to pick up and like knowing. I mean, it sounds like you're really guiding the image basically from production until post, essentially. Was it common for you to always be working in color? Was that something that you kind of always asked for? Because I don't know that every DP gets to work in color on their projects. Or is that something that's just standardized when it comes to features? Or
Well, it should be. In a commercial world, often the director and the DP aren't involved in the final color correcting. The clients take it away. But for most independent films, television, generally they try to keep the DP involved in the loop. And I always tried to be there for the final coloring and mastering, not just the answer printing, but then the final transfer to video. It became an issue with, in the ASC and the union because we don't get paid often for this time. And in the early days of film, it became a tradition because answer printing, was a real-time thing. So let's say you did 3 answer prints. So it's a 2-hour movie. So you go in and watch for 2 hours and stop and start. So maybe it's a 3-hour session for a 2-hour movie. And you do it 2 more times over the course of 2 weeks or something. So you'd volunteer your time for free. Mm-hmm. Then came along home video, and you'd say, okay, now I need 2 days or 3 days in a telecine suite to transfer this movie on top of the 2 or 3 weeks of color correcting the answer print. Okay, that's fine. Then DIs came along, and suddenly it was 10 days in a DI suite. And you're starting to go like, I'm in a room for 10 days surrounded by people who are getting paid to be here. The editor's here, the director, the colorist, they're all getting paid, but I'm the only person in this room who's not being paid for 10 days to sit here and do this work. So,
jeez.
But if you didn't do it, then you weren't in control of the image, so you'd do it anyway. But and it's just still an issue. If you can, your agent will negotiate to basically get you paid for your post time.
Yeah.
So,
right, because it's your name. You
do it anyway, whether you get paid for it or not. But ideally, you get paid for your time. Now with television, because there's so many more episodes and hours, and it's harder to find the time. I still supervise everything I shoot for television, but it's more a faster system where essentially the colorist does a pass without me, and then I'll screen it and then give him notes based on that pass. And so an hour-long episode may take 2 or 3 hours of time, but
all remote, sort of.
Well, now it's, it used to be I'd go into the post house, but it's become remote because I live in LA and our current show is in New York. So it'd be color correct New York. First episode, I'm still in New York shooting. Might be in town to color correct. Otherwise, I'm back in LA. So it's a live session, but streaming. We basically remote. And then COVID came along and everything went remote for a while, even in town. So that's become more common. I don't like remote color correcting because there's always this assumption that we're looking at the same image.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've calibrated the monitors remotely to match, but it's like until you're actually looking at the same monitor together, it's really hard to trust that your monitor is the same as their monitor and you're seeing the same things.
And in like a color suite, the room and like the lighting is like controlled to a certain
green walls.
Yeah, I mean, you could be like watching it right here. Your eyes are going to be dilated differently. Your colors are going to look different.
Yeah, and whether it's a plasma screen or LCD screen or big screen DI theater, it's all, your reactions are different. And there's a lot of psychological issues with color correcting that, that one is your eyes get tired. Like if I have a sequence that's all in blue moonlight, I'll have the colors save a few day exterior shots and have them in the frame store. And every couple minutes, I'll have just flash up a neutral scene. Like I just want to see something that's not blue, because I've been staring at blue lighting for so long that what happens is your eyes neutralize the blue, and you start adding blue in. You go, there's not enough blue here, so you add some more blue in. But then as soon as you put up a neutral shot, you realize you've made everything super blue, because your brain has slowly filtered out the blue. So you have to step away now and then to rebalance your eyeballs.
It's like cleansing your palate.
Yeah. Similar to
coffee
that.
beans.
And then there's also, when you're talking about scenes that are dark, for example, Alan Davia once said that he always color corrected to a answer print with the sound on it, because usually the first answer print is silent, and then the second answer print would be composite with an optical track on it. But he found that he had to color correct with the sound because when you get to very dark scenes that are silent, everything looks too dark because your brain needs information. So you're watching just the silent stuff of people running through this moonlit basement or whatever it is, dark, and all you can think of is, I can't see anything, it's just dark. But as soon as you hear it with the soundtrack, you hear footsteps, you hear creakings, you hear birds, whatever you hear, your brain thinks you're seeing more than you are, because the sound is creating a world that your brain can fill in all the gaps with the audio. So the scene looks less dark with sound on it, which is an odd psychological effect, but it's true. So when you're doing a dark movie, it's really useful to hear it with the soundtrack, because it makes you less worried about how dark things are falling off. You could pan into a completely pitch black moment where it's just nothing, but if you hear the action for a moment, you don't sweat it, because you think, okay, I know what's going on. I hear it still, and I pan it back into light again. But in a silent print, you're just like what happened? It just went dark there. So, it's psychological. And even on set with monitors, even you work in a DIT tent, you're running inside and outside or outside and inside. I sort of learned that if you're doing very dark scenes, you have to be wary of underexposing by monitor too much, because what happens is if you're working in a dark environment and you go into a dark room, the monitor is actually a light source. It's like staring into a lamp. So your brain goes, oh, the scene's too bright, and you start underexposing it to make it look right to your eyes. And then you get dailies back the next day and everything looks really dark. And you go, why does it look so dark? Oh, now I'm looking at dailies in a room with lighting on and everything looks too dark. So, and it's the same thing with day exteriors. You do day exteriors, you go to your monitor, and the monitor now looks too dim. So you start overexposing so everything feels like it's daylight brightness. And then you get dailies back and everything is too bright. And it's because, again, your brain is thinking that the monitor relative to the real world situation is trying to do some sort of balancing act. So now when I sit at the monitor in a car day, process trailer work or day exterior, I say, well, if things look a little dim on the monitor, it's about right. If it feels slightly down, and if it's a dark interior and go back to the DID monitor, I said, well, if it feels a little hot on the monitor, that's actually right. It's just, I have to tell my brain to slightly ignore what I'm seeing and make some sort of mental compensation.
Do you use any tools to do you use false color or waveforms to kind of verify that? Or
Yeah, I not too technically, but often I glance down at the false colors. That's more for continuity. I say the last shot had a lot of the purple in it, or this was going green, and and I'd sort of get a feel for the tonal range on the false colors. And so when I start covering, I go that shirt was always going deep blue. So maybe I should, try to expose it or light it so it's still deep blue, so but also you save frames from every setup. So you often click back and forth to previous, go back to the master, go back to the two shot, go back to the single, or we're shooting this single. I want to see the reverse single and see how they intercut. So you get some feeling of the contrast and the difference and things like that. So they're all, again, there's the technical aspect of exposing, but a lot of it is just how it feels right to your eye, and that's why it's so useful. To me, the advantage digital is you see it on a monitor. Now, I'm relying on a well-calibrated monitor, a good OLED monitor and a DIT tent to make judgments. I would have a hard time running around with just a little onboard monitor on my own, and because I couldn't trust that.
Yeah.
So I'd probably rely more on false colors and other tools at that point, because the monitor is no longer trustworthy.
Do you feel like there has to be a difference, but I mean, I see just the amount of monitors that are on set and the amount of people looking at the monitor on set. You must have felt that change when it was just you looking through the camera, or maybe there was one video tap that was just like for reference. And now it's like everyone can see this, everyone can have an opinion. That must affect sort of your role a little bit, no?
Yeah, it does. Although it generally has not been a problem for me. I've heard other DPs talk about this committee thing where everyone has an opinion. Maybe it's because I'm afforded some respect or something, but I've never had anything bad from a bunch of people seeing the monitor image. And generally you get compliments instead or something like that, but occasionally you'll get a note from someone, and it's actually not a bad thing to have more eyes on the image, someone, because you're staring at certain things, and then someone will catch something that you aren't catching, like the fact you're not rolling. Oh, we're not rolling? Oh, yeah.